Yes. Fantastic. So everyone, welcome to the ArbTech event kicking off the autumn 2022. I am privileged to welcome Joe Raczynski and Colin to talk about the merge. The merge is a crypto event to do with the Ethereum blockchain, and we thought that it was important to explain it to a wider audience. This is not, I think, as Joe has helpfully said on our LinkedIn page, this is not an esoteric event. This is something that where Ethereum is moving towards its 2.0 state of being, and it is something that they gave several years thought about, and it does mean that it's going to change how blockchains operate in the future, inevitably, because they are, by market capitalization, second only to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is at 363 billion at the moment. Ethereum is at 161 billion. We're talking about big numbers. These people, there are brains behind this this endeavor, and they are influencing this space. And it is a network update to transition from their current form of proof of work to proof of stake, a consensus mechanism that we are going to explain to you via our speakers this evening. It is also the first reason that is put forward by Ethereum is that it will bring about a 99% reduction in energy costs, the energy costs associated with processing the transactions, the blockchain transactions. That's not the only reason. It is an important reason, but it's also something that our speakers can tell us whether that's actually true or not. And I'm going to introduce them now in alphabetical order because both of their names begin with R. Joe Raczynski. Joe Raczynski is a technologist and futurist, and I'm really pleased that he found this a compelling conversation and said so on our LinkedIn page, saying, you know, it's important to say this because whatever happens with Ethereum in 10 years' time, this is going to influence the way that blockchain functions in the future. And we're going to talk about that this evening. He is a global leader. He leverages emerging technology to improve economic competitiveness, equity, and business resilience. He is a prolific and very interesting writer, I would say, to the lawyers in the audience. If you want to understand what's going on in the space, read Joe Raczynski because he makes it understandable. He's intelligently understandable. He writes about economic, political, and global technology trends as they happen and the impact, the crossroads between our professional and personal lives. He hosts the fantastic Technology Snippets Today podcast. It's a video series exploring the cutting edge technology and innovation. And our other speaker is Colin Rule. Well, I mean, what can I say about Colin, except that we have been, I have been privileged to share a lot of panels with him. He's the president and CEO of Mediate.com. In 2011, he co-founded Moderator.com, which was an ODR provider based in Silicon Valley. It was acquired by Tyler Technology in 2017, and Colin served as VP of ODR at Tyler until 2020. And then from 2003 to 2011, he was director of ODR at eBay and PayPal, and he devised their ODR systems. And so he is currently the co-chair of the advisory board of the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution at UMass Amherst, and a non-resident fellow at the Gould Center for Conflict Resolution at Stanford Law School. So I think we should start with the basics, gentlemen, if you don't mind. I mean, you're dealing with lawyers and mostly, but not always. What is the merge? Why the merge? Why did it need to happen? And what brought it about? I don't know whether, Colin, you want to start on this one.
Sure. Well, this is a dangerous thing to be on a panel with an expert like Joe. So maybe I'm going to get out of the way. I mean, I think there's first of all, what is the merge? I think it's a great question. And you described it actually pretty well, Sophie. You know, I think Ethereum has been a proof of work system for a long time. And now to switch to a stake-based system is a big change.
I think maybe, Colin, I'm sorry, maybe you want to explain very quickly proof of work, proof of stake. What does that mean? What's the difference?
Sure. Again, it's dangerous to be on. Let me just be clear. I am an Ethereum holder, but it's a very small amount. I don't think that it affects my opinions here. And I'm an interested observer in all of this, but I don't currently have a dog in the fight. So I want to thank you, Sophie, for that very generous introduction. And Joe, please don't hesitate to correct me if I get wrong on any of this, because I'm not a coder on the Ethereum blockchain, but I'm an interested observer, as I say, and I'm a nerd, and I love watching this technology. But maybe I'll sort of say it the way I would explain it to my mom, and then Joe can give us the technical details. You know, I think virtual currencies, especially the two biggest, as you say, Bitcoin and Ethereum, for a long time were backed by math problems. And the way that they were originally designed is essentially to mine new coins, either new Ethereum or new Bitcoins. You had to solve a series of very complicated math problems. So what you saw was there were a lot of people who were miners who would set up hardware systems, often with very powerful graphics cards, because graphics cards had the appropriate hardware for doing these calculations. And when they completed these calculations and they could demonstrate that they had completed them successfully, they would mine essentially a new coin. And there's a limited number of essentially coins that can be mined based on the math that undergirds these currencies. And it gets more complicated the further you go along. And as it turned out, these currencies went up in value enormously for a bunch of years. So there was a huge financial incentive for people all around the world to set up these hardware rigs and locate them in rural areas where they could get cheap energy to mine these coins, because they were going to end up making a lot of money because the coins were worth a lot of money. But what we found was this started to consume enormous amounts of energy, and the amount of energy that was being consumed by the hardware that was mining these coins, it became an ecological issue as well. And because the value of these coins continued to rise, even though the math problems got harder and harder, people were still putting a lot of time and energy into this. It also created a certain amount of churn within these systems, because it took time. It took resources to actually go through these proof of work calculations. So the guy who's really behind the Ethereum network, I've read his name a million times. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I think it's Vitalik. He said, you know, look, we're going to make a shift in the way Ethereum works. We're not going to rely on the proof of work demonstrating that you've done all these complicated math problems. We instead are going to go to a proof of stake system, which essentially means that certain people who hold Ethereum, they can stake some of their currency in order to join a network that will do the validations without requiring all of this very complicated math. So as you say, Sophie, the reason why this is so ecologically beneficial is it's going to take much less energy, because we're not going to have to do all these crazy math problems and run all of these, you know, little hardware rigs with these expensive graphics cards to do the math. Now, essentially, anybody who's willing to put up 32 Ethereum coins, which is not an insignificant amount of money, but they can then stake the system. And then you can run a little bit of code, even on your personal computer or on your phone, that contributes to the stability of the overall Ethereum system, and then generates essentially the trust layer that maintains the functioning of the system. So now what's happened is there's a bunch of other companies that have come in. So you don't have to personally stake these 32 Ethereum coins in order to join into this proof of stake system. You can contribute your Ethereum and other marketplaces like Lido and sort of pooled services where they'll handle some of that for you. But this is a big change, and it's an amazing thing that the administrators of the Ethereum system, which is so huge, as you say, billions and billions of dollars in this system, to be able to make this code change in flight and switch from a proof of work system to a proof of stake system. It also speeds up the system because we don't have to do all this math. So instead of only 30 transactions. I think it's 30 transactions a second. It's gone to 1,000 or something like that. I mean, it's an amazing jump in the speed. So now there's a lot of pressure on Bitcoin and some other virtual currencies to follow suit and maybe imitate, now that Ethereum has made the successful jump. This isn't the end of, you know, the work that's going to be done in Ethereum. I think another very important stage that's still coming is what they call the sharding, which is where the blockchain will be divided into multiple pieces. And that's going to be another big change. It's going to take multiple years.
We're going to come to that
We're
a
going to talk
little bit
about
later.
that. But hopefully that is that's the way I'd explain it to my mom. So
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Take a bite
It's quite interesting that they're taking the lead. And Joe, I wonder what your thoughts are on well, first of all, taking the lead on the merge, and whether, you know, what is Ethereum trying to achieve? Are they trying to get a market advantage? Are they really true believers in the ecological advantage of this? What's your view on this? I mean, you are the futurist. You look in the crystal ball.
Well, no, Colin, you did an exceptional job going through that. It makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if I have a ton to add with respect to some of those things. I'll describe some areas that all relate to this, and of course, Sophie, to your question. So it's wild to think about. Ethereum started in 2015, and their original idea was to be proof of stake in the very beginning, but then realized, wow, this is actually kind of complicated. Bitcoin's been doing it since 2009 or whatever, right around there. And so could they back then do something like this? And realized it was way too complicated. So it's taken them roughly 7 years, highly concentrated in the last 5 years, to roll this, what was originally titled ETH 2.0. Sometimes it's called ETH 2. And they're about 55% complete once this merge happened. And I'll go through a little bit more of the details around the merge itself, because there are at least 4 other components that we'll get to later that really expands the capabilities of Ethereum. So when I think about this, and I date myself, that I got involved in Bitcoin, and for better or for worse, in 2011, Ethereum 2016, you know, I've done my own cryptocurrencies, which I have not sold, and NFTs as well. So I have a weird perspective on this, having seen it grown up and change and evolve, and then the narrative that's around a lot of these things right now, we have to be careful of on both sides. Okay, so what's special about Ethereum is that it's been sort of telegraphing this for the last 5 years. Since then, you have at least, I'd say, 10, 15-ish other blockchains that are natively proof of stake. So they came out when they first did their initial block, it was proof of stake, such that if you wanted to participate as a validator, you had to have some of this, own it, lock it in a smart contract that basically says, well, I'm going to put this in. It's going to help the validators prove this. It'll still do this mathematical thing where it's randomly sending certain nodes or wallets, hey, you need to actually be a part of this, and they get slashed. If you're a machine, or if you actively try to mess around with the confirmations, you will get slashed, which means that you lose what you would actually put into that smart contract. So to your question, Sophie, basically it's taken a long time for Ethereum to get there. They finally did, and the first component was, and just to get more descriptive around this, while others have been doing this for quite some time, for the last 3 or 4 years maybe, the way they like to describe it is, imagine yourself in a beautiful, I don't know, what we call it, let's go with BMW or an Audi, cruising down the Autobahn in Germany. And what the merge is trying to do is take that car that's flying down at 150 kilometers an hour, and they want to replace that gas combustion engine with an electric one while it's cruising at 150 kilometers an hour. So what they did was they created a beacon chain probably 2 years ago. So the mainnet chain, which is the original chain, has all the transactions, every NFT, every cryptocurrency in the Ethereum network, ERC20s, all are on that particular blockchain, the original one. They created a shell over here, and they called that the beacon chain in 2020. And so what they wanted to do was at some point slide all that information, which was the merge, into the shell. And so then that it would run and cruise along with no missing transactions, no concern about my currency, my token, my ETH, or
Yes,
any of the other ones that are
yes.
connected to that. So
Excellent. Excellent. So I think we have explained the difference between proof of work and proof of stake. And I mean, what is your, they are putting forward the energy consumption as a first reason for this. I mean, is there any concern about access to the blockchain as a result of Ethereum 2.0? Is there any concern about security? Is there any concern about reduced centralization? What are the other reasons for Ethereum to go there? Is there a concern? Ethereum has always been, yes, exactly. Eric is putting in the chat, concern about ETH volatility at the merge. Is there a concern about the actual token value and its volatility? Is there a concern about putting that to rest for a reason? Do you have any views about that, Joe?
there's a lot of things there. Great questions, comments, and thoughts. I mean, yeah, so one of the biggest benefits of all this is what you cited earlier, is the 99.95% less electricity being necessary. So that clearly has an ESG component, right? So now that governments around the world or companies that had a concern around, oh, we're burning all this electricity to confirm transactions that happen through proof of work, we don't want to deal with that. And so even artists were trepidatious about using NFTs and putting their NFTs onto the Ethereum blockchain, because they're like, how, look, I'm an artist, I believe in saving the world, also promoting my art and all this stuff. Why do I want to go down that road? So then you saw all of the other blockchains like Near and Cardano, Avalanche, Polkadot, all these other ones that came along that said, hey, we're going to compete against this. We're going to be natively proof of stake. And so they started moving in those directions. So environmental is definitely big. Another benefit is that it's technically deflationary in the sense that we all know this, but Bitcoin has 21 million tokens or coins that will ever be minted. It's like another 100-ish more years to get to that point. Ethereum never really had a limit per se. They got up to 150 million tokens, but it should come down. It is coming down. And some people call it the triple halving. So when you hear about Bitcoin going through a halving, what it means is that every X number of years, the numbers of Bitcoin that are rewarded to that machine or the groups of machines that won that computational race get X number of tokens. And every 4 years or so, it halves it so that it gets smaller and smaller. Long time ago, it was like 16, 12, 8. So you get further and further down the road. So that's also a big deal there. But there's an argument about whether it's going to be more centralized or more decentralized. The last point that I'll say on this is that you could conceivably say that it's going to be more decentralized, because if I had a Raspberry Pi, and if anybody's ever seen these things before, they're the most rudimentary of processors. You can actually just plug in, and it's like a little baby computer, and you could do things with it, right? You could actually run sort of validator node on that. If you wanted to. It's a validator node, not the full node that has all the transactions, because that would be quite a large hard drive that you'd have to connect to.
Thank you. I mean, Colin, what do you think? Do you think that this move is going to put Ethereum at the forefront? Are they trying to get a bigger slice of the market? Are they trying to make ETH the cryptocurrency to go for, as opposed to Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I think already things were headed in that direction. I think the people understood that the team behind Ethereum was sort of more forward thinking. You know, I think really this is a huge confidence building mechanism. I mean, to say you're going to do this and then pull it off is amazing. I mean, there were past events with Ethereum where there were big frauds that led to forks. You know, that was why Ethereum Classic was first set up.
Absolutely,
and I think that those really did harm people's confidence, and I think it did create a competitive opportunity for competing blockchains. That they pulled this off, I think, is a huge confidence builder. And I think, you know, there are, I think I read an article that said this is kind of like throwing a rock into a pond. Like, you don't really know all of the impacts. I mean, Ethereum's actually down through the merge, but that's also, you know, it could be, we had the crypto collapse, which, you know, presaged, which happened before any of the merge stuff happened. So it might have been good. It took some air out of the balloon. One of the things that I said is, people were saying there's very little rationale to hold on to standard ETH. I mean, you should stake all your ETH at this point, because then you can make 5 to 7% on it, and you have liquidity through these marketplaces like Lido. So, you know, what you're seeing also is Ethereum Classic is up, because all of the miners that had all this hardware that were mining these Ethereum coins, well, then they went to proof of stake. What are they going to do with this hardware? So they decided to go to Ethereum Classic. But Ethereum itself, I think, was down through the merge. So there's a lot of unpredictability in terms of what the impacts of this are going to be. But I think, again, we have to keep an eye on the long term here. And if people are picking a blockchain upon which to build their applications, and I think the blockchain, really, the Ethereum blockchain, may end up being, you know, the real revolutionary technology here, because so many other innovations are being based on it. I think this is a huge confidence builder. And I think, you know, I think there was a kind of a PR problem for virtual currencies with how much money they were consuming. And I think that this is a great story to tell. And that's why I think they're leading with the economic benefits of the merge. But I think longer term, again, I think this is that they were able to pull this off is a huge confidence builder. And I think it really adds to the momentum Ethereum already had as the default, you know, as the #1 global currency. I think Bitcoin also, you know, as they said originally, I think, you know, Satoshi Nakamura, when he put this together, he said he wanted it to be she, or who knows, you know, they,
we don't
you
know, or
we don't know. They wanted people to buy transactions with it. I mean, you know, we talk about the guy who bought Domino's Pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin back in the day. And now it's really a reserve currency. It's like buying gold blocks. You know, it's not really a practical way to engage in transactions. I think Ethereum, because it is evolving and because the stack is evolving, I think they are maintaining an argument that they are really a currency for actually engaging in transactions. And I think that makes it a more attractive ecosystem for people who are looking to leverage a trusted blockchain to use Ethereum, because they are continuing to evolve the back end in this way. So
that's really interesting. So do you think that other blockchains are looking at this very closely? And so, and like the Bitcoin blockchain, for example, I mean, what is this of relevance to them? I would have thought so.
There is a lot of talk about that, but Bitcoin is not administered in the same way that Ethereum is. I feel like it's as I say, it's sort of become like gold blocks. So it's like there's not as much innovation in that ecosystem as there is in Ethereum. And I think that's why a lot of the innovators and entrepreneurs, you know, are building on the Ethereum blockchain. But as Joe said, there's these competing blockchains that emerge subsequently. And, you know, that's the way startups have an advantage over the incumbents. They don't have this massive overhead that they have to maintain. It's not like turning around an aircraft carrier. They're a speedboat, so they can make changes very quickly. And then that's the reason why, well, maybe we should pick one of these newer architectures because they don't have this bloat. But for Ethereum to be able to make a switch like this is like, wow, okay, they can actually turn this aircraft carrier around too. So maybe, you know, and there's benefits to using a big default system like this, because really this is about trust technology. And I think that's one of the main things that they achieved, is it undergirded the trust of the system, as they could pull something like this off and they don't drop the transaction. So
there's something I wanted to talk about. I mean, I know it's off the top of my head and it's a little bit philosophical, but I know that the blockchain is all about the community and distributed. But if it weren't for Vitalik and Vitalik Buterin, who is the creator, one of the creators of Ethereum, if it weren't for him, and his vision and his saying, we're going to do this, that's not distributed, right? This is coming from the top. This is I just want to get your thoughts, both of you, on, is this really a top-down decision, or is this not against the blockchain philosophy, Joe?
No, so what's so fantastic about him, and I've thrown this out in a tweet a long time ago, that I think at some point in time, I know it's going to sound absolutely absurd, but I think at some point in time he will receive some sort of Nobel Prize. He is that smart an individual, that's self-deprecating, And what he's doing is he's really pushing ideas that may have come from him initially, but he's done it in such a fashion that he's putting it out there, and then people can create proposals or ideas. They can vote on it. That's the whole idea, behind a DAO, and in
Yeah.
essence, that's
Yes,
what they're working
yes,
on,
yes, yes, yes.
is to be able to do some more of that, and then sort of scale that out so that the best ideas rise to the top and people can then execute on that, or code will be able to execute on that. And that's really what we're going to start to see much more of in that space. So one of the crazy tugs and pulls that when Colin was going through his excellent explanation of those things that the blockchains are really grappling with right now are the three core tenets for what people want in this space, which is decentralization, security, and scalability. And you can look at each one of the blockchains, the newer ones that are out there, and they actually, to be honest, may have better code, quite honestly, than Ethereum. And so what Colin mentioned, that in terms of this feat that was pulled off, when you have something that's been around for 7 years now, they're actually able to take just enormous amounts of information and sort of port it
Yes,
over and change everything. Was an amazing thing. But these other organizations have been around for a few years, and they probably have things that are faster. They can definitely handle more transactions, but they're giving up on either security or decentralization. And so when you see these blockchains, and you'll see them rise, because it's not going to be one, more than likely it'll be many that rise to
yeah,
the top.
yeah.
Ethereum may or may not lead the way. We'll see. It does now. But they're going to compete on different levels. Does it make more sense to do my NFTs on Polkadot or Solana, because they can do 50,000 transactions and it's currently, let's say, 3 cents per transaction, where right now, if I'm doing a transaction on Ethereum, it's come down from I've seen transactions as high as $10,000 for one transaction.
Oh God.
Right now, I know. Right now, it's about $1.50-ish. The last time I looked at it.
Mm.
So you're going to see different things that pop up, and of course, it's going to be based on demand.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
in the Ethereum world, it is all demand based, and which is kind of a nice thing, but it can be painful for people when you're trying to do one small thing, send somebody some money or whatever the case is.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
would echo that. I think Vitalik is kind of like the Linus Torvalds of Ethereum, like he was a benevolent visionary who created this and sort of gave it to the world, but it's gone way beyond him now. There's so many people innovating and contributing to this project. That's why it's so amazing to herd all these cats and, make this transition happen. And I do think brand matters. And I do think that this is a huge brand building exercise for Ethereum. Everybody's talking about Ethereum. It definitely is, it's a huge focus to be able to pull something like this off. But as I said, it's an evolving organism. And I think, every institution needs to continue to innovate and compete. And I think, we were talking, somebody posted in the chat about, benevolent dictatorship. I think it's true. There is power that's held in the hands of the rule writers, but the beauty of these systems, the reason why this is decentralized finance, is because it is truly decentralized. Once the rules and the protocols are put out there, everybody operates in those rules. So I think there's still there's a lot of innovation yet to come. And you wanted to talk about the shard. I think that's going to be a bigger thing in the arbitration and legal
That
tech
was
space.
going to be my next question.
Okay, well,
Let's
there you
talk
go.
about
I'm
it.
sorry.
What's
Yeah.
going on? So there are next steps for Ethereum. The merge is only the first step. It has happened now. And we have the surge, the verge, the purge. Can we have, talk to us about the shard, Colin?
So again, I'm going to rely on Joe for the technical details to make sure I don't get it right.
Go
I'll
ahead.
explain it to my grandma again, to my mom, who is about, not a grandma yet, but soon. The vision, I think the idea of the shard, again, is it's a way of decentralizing the blockchain. So it's
So just to say, I mean, Ethereum is phasing more improvements, is what we should say for our audience.
I think that's right. I think that's
Which
right.
they call the surge, the verge, the purge. These are the 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, whatever it is.
So the point I want to make is this is an evolving ecosystem, and the back end is going to be changing and evolving over time. And this is another future date. I think it's envisioned, I don't know, 3 or 4 years from now, this fragmenting of the blockchain, so it will be distributed.
So the
more so
shard,
than
the
it currently
shard
is.
is what you say is going to be a fragmenting of the blockchain. How is that going to happen? What does that mean?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't really know the technical aspects of it, but I think there is a certain amount of centralization in the way the blockchain is currently administered. And I think the shard is a vision for decentralizing that so they can break the blockchain into different components. Joe, I don't know, can you explain it better than I do?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So it's breaking it up into separate components that you can then enable sort of a bundling of transactions that sit outside. And once you get to a certain extent, a number of bundlings, then it can then be sent to sort of the layer one level. And sort of another component of this is, so the merge technically did not improve the scalability. So we're still roughly at 15 to 20 transactions per second, so to speak, or actually every 12 to 13 seconds. It improved the time frame from 13 seconds to roughly 12 seconds. So that's not huge. It's this part that you're talking about, that Colin's talking about around this, that will improve it to roughly 100,000 transactions per second over the course of the next few years. So that's a huge deal. That's a big deal.
That's the sharding.
That's the sharding under the surge, right? So that's
The
the
surge.
surge
Okay.
part of it. One thing that people should be aware of that I think not many talk about is that there are already other organizations that have created layer 2 solutions, which mean that there's sort of like a blockchain that then connects into Ethereum. And what they
Right.
do is they try to provide very inexpensive transactions at a much higher level. And then
Right.
it does exactly what the sharding is supposed to do. So that's where it's gonna be weird, because I talk to organizations that are like Polygon who
Yes.
build these things. And I'm like, well, in a few years, if it's going to be native to what Ethereum can do, then do you still have a business? And they're like, yeah,
Yes.
we'll still be able to do that, but it'll be different because it won't be able to handle as many transactions. So in other words, there's businesses out there right now that are trying to solve for that transactional piece in terms of how expensive it is and how many they can do per second. But the surge, as Colin was talking about, the sharding aspect of it is a big part, which will improve how many transactions can happen per second.
Mm-hmm.
And so the surge is the next level, and then we have, as they say, the verge and the purge. What does that mean to the
I don't know anything about
layperson?
the purge, so I'm relying on you for that, Joe.
That's what Vitalik says.
So this is where the Verge basically is talking about yet another piece of stateless clients. So if there's any true technical people out there, stateless clients are things that you can kind of spin up very quickly that don't require extensive data to be at rest on that machine. So think about your hard drive.
Right.
You won't
Right.
necessarily have to have all that. You can kind of deal with it without it. And so they use something called Verkle trees, which gets to be very, very mathematical intensive.
Yes,
And
yes.
we're not going to go down that road.
No, we're
But
not. but it's extremely, it's a little bit like the Schelling point. It's that sort of level of mathematical, yes.
because storage gets to be insane because it's growing exponentially at this stage.
So I wanted to say just before we start taking questions, all these developments in Ethereum. So we have the blockchain becoming more mainstream, people being more interested in holding crypto, especially here in the Banana Republic of the UK, where the sterling has plunged down very. I'm joking, but I'm not joking. There are many countries where, the currency doesn't hold up and they are interested in holding cryptocurrency. Does the development of ETH 2.0 mean that it's safer, easier, more accessible for, Joe Blogs on the street or myself to hold cryptocurrency? Is it safer? What are your thoughts on that, Colin?
Well, I mean, you don't have to scratch me too hard to know that I'm very excited about the future of decentralized finance and decentralized justice. I actually don't think that I mean, maybe the buzz around the merge is gonna, make it into more people's inboxes and get them more interested. I mean, if it builds confidence in Ethereum, as a currency, then that may incentivize somebody to, but I don't think it increases access necessarily. There's still a lot of innovation that has to happen at the last mile. You've got a lot of, organizations out there promoting virtual currencies and, innovating around virtual currency. And I think that this is one step in that long journey. I mean, Sophie, you and I have been on enough panels to know, I think this is a relentless march towards a future where a lot of the institutions of civil society that normally have resided within the nation state are going to shift into technology. So I think that this is a massive long-term reorganization of the way that we organize our society. And I served in the Peace Corps in Eritrea, and I know that the government engages in ruthless currency manipulation in order to subjugate its peoples. And if you want to get any currency into Eritrea and convert it into Nakfa, the local currency, you're going to be giving half of the value away to the government. Because they're playing games on the back end. So the whole beauty of these virtual currencies is they are theoretically outside of the control of the state. So, we don't have to pay all of these fees to move money around. I mean, there's the gas fees that Joe was mentioning, but, those are lessening all the time. So if we have truly frictionless virtual currency that we can use in any country, and we don't have to be paying Thomas Cook, 30% off the top every time we change from one to the other, that's a pretty big reorganization in the way the world works. But the nation state's not going to be very happy about that. And, we talk about the future of justice, and that's what Federico talks about at Claros.
Yeah, that's what ArbTech
it's going to be
about.
The future of justice is code is the law. So you don't have to worry about what jurisdiction you're in. You don't have to worry about the judges and jails and, what area you live in, because we're going to be living in this global society, and it's going to be regulated by rules that look a lot more like what Vitalik and Ethereum and the DAOs are putting together. So slowly but surely, we're seeing this evolution. Now, what we are seeing is in the United States, there's some talk about regulating Ethereum now as a security, which means the government is
so
going to
that
get
was my next question. Yes,
I mean,
please.
if you can make 5 to 7% by staking your Ethereum, this starts to look like a T-bill, So, the government is going to get itchier and itchier about this. And they've already felt this way about Bitcoin, and they've felt this about other virtual currencies because, people were engaging in transactions and then covering their tracks. So the government didn't know how to get its tax revenue out of those sales. So, again, this is a long-term thing. The merge is merely one step in a marathon. But I think that it's almost inevitable from my perspective that these trends are going to accelerate, and there's going to be chaos that's unleashed as these new technologies achieve prominence, and we're going to have to figure out how to civilize them. But this is an enormous opportunity to build the world of the future, and to the extent that this step moves us in the right direction, it's a good thing. But Joe, I'm interested in your thoughts.
No, Joe, I would like to know, I mean, what did you think about the SEC, sort of nudging in that direction? I know that the US authorities have been trying to get their hands on crypto for a time. What do you think about the SEC saying, oh, well, if you're going that direction, then you're going to be a security? What do you think about that?
So this is actually one of the biggest headwinds that actually does concern me. And I would have, it's so funny. We did not talk about any of these things before with Colin and I. And so I would have actually gone down the exact same path that he just did and echo all of his sentiments that he just described. And then towards the end there is where I'm like, it drops off and it gets a little bit nerve-wracking for some that believe in decentralization and the greater good that is this, because it truly can be for the greater good. But what we're talking about are the ability to create and take away intermediaries. So we're taking away intermediaries, which could be businesses, could be governments, and governments are starting to get wind of this. So when you have someone like Gary Gensler, who heads up the SEC, who used to be at MIT, used to talk about blockchain, I dare say 9 years ago. And if you watch, and you can watch some of these talks that he's done, he is absolutely about blockchain. He's like, oh, this is amazing technology. You can do this, this, and this. But since he has gone to the agency, he has definitely had a much more hawkish view on all cryptocurrencies. And there's good reason for some of that, because there's still a lot of scammers out there. But the greater good that can come from this, if leveraged properly, and there is need for some regulation, there's immense possibility. So when we're talking about what he mentioned with the merge, he's like, oh, now maybe it is a security. And if you're going to classify this, you have to look at the Howey test going back 60, 70 years in the United States, which are 4 tenets, that it has to meet all 4 tenets: an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profits to be derived from the efforts of others. The last one, in my argument, is where this does not fit. So to be derived from the efforts of others, well, all we're doing, if we're helping put our money, your stake, you can even stake a little bit of money, as Colin was talking about. You can split that up and not do 32, but pool your money together with other people. Yes, you're getting some money back because you're getting the 5 to 7%, and it may go up a little bit more. And I've seen upwards of 200 or 300% in other areas for other cryptocurrencies. It's a common enterprise, yes, but to be derived by the efforts of others. This, you're just a lot of securing a network. That's all you're doing. So there's arguments that can be made on both sides. Hopefully, ultimately we get to the ends where basically say that yes, this is something that makes sense for the greater good. Let's not overly regulate, but that's yet to be determined.
Well, I think Andre asked a great question in the chat. He was talking about, is this a security or a platform or a protocol? I mean, it's almost like if we all agree on the rules for a system, I think the reason why the SEC is talking about this as a security, as you say, Joe, is it's because, well, now you get a return on it, right? It's like I put
Right.
my money into staked ether, I'm going to get a payback. It's like, okay, well, all of a sudden this looks like a treasury bill, but
It does, yeah.
but if you just put your money in Ethereum, it may appreciate, it may depreciate, but a currency is not an investment necessarily. So if we all agree, nobody's regulating HTTP or 10-base-T or any of these rules that system, we all come up with this, okay, this is the way we're going to interoperate. We're going to plug all of our systems together and they're going to work. Okay, great. That's not a security. Once we start to look a little bit more like something the SEC is interested in, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see some of these protocols pull back, because they don't want to get into that regulatory frame. But the point I want to make is this is way bigger than the United States. This is way bigger than any country's regulatory authority. And this is what we're talking about in Silicon Valley all the time. We've talked about world government, like, oh, let's create world government. Well, governments aren't able to do world government because, as you see, if you get too globalist, you get a populist backlash and it takes your knees out from under you. So now what's happening is companies like Google and Microsoft and Alibaba, they're building global initiatives. They don't care about borders. If the United States bans facial recognition, well, that's fine. They'll do it in Beijing and Bangalore. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of this innovation. Is it's stateless. It's not tied to geography. It's not tied to place. It's not tied to identity. And that makes it very difficult for national regulatory frameworks to understand how to get their arms around it. So, and I think it's just going to continue to be slippery, and it's going to evolve independent of what governments. I mean, the other thing about governments is they're not having conversations like this in DC. They have no idea what the merge means. They're still talking about privacy, and that horse was out of the barn 20 years ago. So AI and virtual currencies, these things are innovating at such a pace that governments can't keep up. So I think that there could be some amount of friction that's created by governments that don't like this, and that they feel like they're going to lose some of their power, they're going to lose some of their influence, so they may create roadblocks. But I think this whole innovation is so slippery, it's going to be able to circumvent those roadblocks, and it's not going to be slowing down anytime soon. I think it's going to continue to accelerate, and it will create disruption and chaos, but we have to figure out how to tame it over time.
So Colin, I think you great point there, but the part that makes me a little more nervous or trepidatious is if you get the United States, you get the EU, you get UK, you get very prominent nation states around the world that all sort of agree to something that could be at the level of cutting the knees out from this technology,
Yeah.
then it kind of has this effect that it could be kind of ruined in some respects, right? Or no? Do you think that's not?
Joe, I think that it's like the reaction has already begun, and I think that they can shake their fist at the rainstorm and it will pass right over them. I really think it's bigger than. I don't know. I don't want to underestimate the power that all of these countries working together, but I think different countries see advantage and disadvantage in all of these trends. So it's going to be very hard to organize the whole world in resistance to something like, you know, Ethereum or blockchain or virtual currencies. I mean, you see, what was it, El Salvador or some country announced that it was the
El Salvador,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Bitcoin,
it's like we're going to
Bitcoin
go
Beach.
all in and we're going to, you know, make this.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
there are many countries in the world. Like, where is the power of the United States? Does it come from our soft power of diplomacy? Does it come from our hard power of the military? Or does it come from our currency? Does it come from our financial control? And I think that established countries, they look at this and they're horrified because this creates a very level playing field. But if you look at many other countries around the world that are victimized by their weak currencies and how they get pushed around by the World Bank and the IMF and the developed world's, you know, manipulating the world money supply in ways that benefit the powerful, I think they'd embrace this and they would not join in necessarily on a movement to cut these innovations off at the knees. So again, I don't think it's going to be happening in 2 years. I don't think it's going to be happening in 5 years. This is going to be happening over the coming decades. But I don't think there's any way to stop it at this point. That's my opinion.
I was right there with you for the last bunch of years, and the rancor, I'm in DC, that I'm hearing, the lack of understanding and the aggressive nature that I've started to see is changing. And I just got something that came in from Europe that was talking about the same sort of thing. They just created a whole new set of rules around this, but I haven't had the chance to go through it. But I am a little bit more concerned than I was about the route of where this may go. So I guess we'll see.
Well, I'm in Silicon Valley, so I'm totally biased. It's in the water out here, but I do think there is a coming clash between the political power and the technological power.
Totally agree.
You know, that's what I think some of the politicians are worried about, is it may have already gotten beyond their control. So, you know, some of these big companies, these internet intermediaries, and now these virtual currencies are so big that they're bigger than any one country's ability to stop them. So.
We have fantastic comments in the chat that we can look at, but I wanted to just close by asking our fantastic speakers. So, Joe, you said on LinkedIn as a reaction to the announcement of this event that this was an important conversation because no matter where Ethereum would end up in 10 years from now, whatever they did, their concept, their ideas, their innovation would mark the future generation of blockchain. And I wanted you to perhaps tell us why that's the case. Why is it not an Ethereum-centered thing? Why does that have a broader impact? And because we need to care about it.
Yeah, so the great question. So the bigger picture is kind of like the mantra that I speak, that this is for the greater good, the potential there for the greater good in terms of helping people out, from access to justice, to money, to leveling the playing field. All of those things are so important. And when you have what amounts to someone who studied Bitcoin from the very early days in Vitalik Buterin, who came up with Ethereum, and he used to write about this stuff. And then he came up with his own blockchain that everyone's basically tried to copy, and which is good, which is for the greater good. And when you start seeing these things and how that could scale out in so many different ways, to understand all of these concepts, these basic concepts, it's almost like I'm a kid of the early internet, such that when I was a little kid, I saved up all my money, cutting lawns and stuff like that, and I bought a computer and I used bulletin boards, and then it became the web. And all these new things like email. I was the first person I knew that had an email address. And I was like, all right, so I'm going to send a note to someone that says this dot CompuServe, whatever it was. It's a new concept, a new idea that we all need to wrap our heads around. So more than anything else, it's about education. It's about tangibly working in this. So I always try to advocate people take 5 or 10 euros, pounds, dollars, whatever it is, and interact with it. Interact with a smart contract, either by sending money or buying an NFT, or whatever the case is, so that you can understand what the future of all of this stuff is, so that when you're an expert in some legal area or anything else, you can then make reference to way this new technology will impact the way you either practice the business or the practice of law or anything and everything else. So that's why I think it's that important.
Yeah,
Colin.
I'll say, Sophie, one of my favorite writers is, and Joe and I are the same era. So I ran my own pirate bulletin board in Texas when I was 11 off my Apple II Plus, so there's a great quote. One of my favorite authors is a guy named Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And he has a quote that says, anything that's invented from before you were born. With anything was invented before you were born is ancient history, and you can ignore it, and it's boring. Anything that's invented between birth and age 30 is incredibly cool, and it will probably, you should get a job promoting it, and it's amazing, and it's going to change the world. Anything invented after age 30 is against the natural order of things and must be resisted at all costs, and probably will result in the end of human civilization.
Don't say that.
Yeah, but then he says, but then after a while you find out it's actually not so bad. And I've seen this dynamic play out. Now I'm definitely on the past 30 equation. So there are a lot of people out there that are wringing their hands. And DC people, I've presented a lot of panels in DC. They're like, slow this down. This is very disruptive. We don't understand what this is going to mean. And it's like, you cannot, that's not the way technology works. These innovations are coming out. Humans don't change. You could take a kid out of, Elizabethan England and drop them into a middle school in Rockville, Maryland. And by the time they were in high school, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. But technology changes, and it's a one-way gate. And when you invent these technologies, you cannot uninvent them. And they change society in very profound ways, be that for the printing press or gunpowder or who knows, the internet. So this is one of these technologies, and it will have a disruptive impact on society. But we have to learn how to civilize these technologies. And I do think it's going to create disruption for a while. But what we're doing now is we have the time to innovate and evolve it and build trust in it and figure it out. So the negative impacts hopefully will be outweighed by the positive impacts. And when I think about my students from Eritrea who are locked in the North Korea of Africa, they have no hope. They're completely oppressed by their government. If they can get an internet connection and go get a gig that pays them in Ethereum, they can potentially build a fortune, take care of their families, find justice, all of these things, because they're going to be have access through a Starlink satellite and some cheap Android tablet. And that's a good thing. But we just have to figure out how to minimize the harm that comes from these changes and maximize the benefit. That, to me, is the challenge that all of us have. So hopefully we can figure out how to do that together.
Absolutely understood and agreed. And my last question before we close, because it's been a fantastic conversation, is do you think that other blockchains are paying attention? Are they going to see this merge and surge and whatever is going afterwards as a challenge to take on? Or are they saying, this has nothing to do with us? Joe?
Yeah, so I just asked that question of the CEO of Near, which is a top 26 blockchains or cryptocurrencies that are out there. And she mentioned that, I said, what do you think about this merge? Has nothing to do with you per se. She's like, well, it elevates all boats. So it raises all boats to the point that people recognize cryptocurrency is becoming more and more important. We're all going to have our niches or niches, depending on how you want to say that. And they feel like their spot is in a certain area around transactions and creativity. So that's what they believe in. So I think that most will say it's a good thing for the overall conversation around cryptocurrency and the acceptance therein.
So would you say, Joe, where you're sitting as a futurist, as someone who is, an observer of the field, that Ethereum is a leader in the blockchain arena?
It's definitely the leader now, and I think. And, I also have some skin in the game here, and I hope that it is as well. But there are other ones like Solana, which is highly centralized. But for whatever reason, every little scandal that happens for it, it comes back. So it may be the future of dealing with NFTs. So we'll see. I still think Ethereum has the strongest game ahead. But things always change so quickly in technology. I've seen it for way too long.
Yes, they do. Colin, what do you think? Do you think that Ethereum is at the helm? Do you think they are the ones worth watching?
And I think now proof of work systems seem like old hat.
They're gone. It's like
that
was
century.
the last
chapter. It's like you're
gonna
need to keep up with the times. But Joseph Schumpeter, he talked about creative disruption, and this is the way technological innovation has always happened. You have 1,000 innovations, and 999 of them die, and one lives. But new companies grow out of the bones of the failures, and we're going to continue to see, virtual currencies collapse. We're going to continue to hear stories about hard forks and fraud and all those problems. And again, that's all part of building the health. I mean, it's sort of a Darwinist experience where only the strong survive. And I think there will be consolidation, and eventually somebody's going to figure out how to turn the corner and deliver this in such a way that it becomes, people will just pull out their phone and say, well, let me just pay for this with X, as opposed to using their MasterCard or their Visa. That's going to happen at some point. But the person that figures that out, they might be in third grade at Bangalore right now. I mean, we don't know where this innovation is going to occur, and that's what's so beautiful about it. So all we can do is continue to innovate, and then go through this evolutionary process, and that's what's going to make it stronger and stronger and more trustworthy.
And what that means is that it's going to make it more accessible, hopefully, in due course as well. I just want.
Oh yeah, please, you got it.
No,
Sophie,
please, no. We have 4 minutes, please.
Well, no, it's all right. I could go on and on. You can probably.
You should say what you have to say, please.
Well, I think the breakthrough technology is going to be, I always say this to legal tech innovators. I say, how far would Airbnb have gotten if they were selling to Hilton and Hyatt? How far would Uber and Lyft have gotten if they were selling to the taxi associations? The incumbents always have an interest in slowing change, slowing innovation to preserve their preferential situation.
Of course.
So we're not going to get to this new world incrementally. What's going to happen is, it's like what they said about Gandhi. First they ignore you, then they make fun of you, then they argue with you, and then they say, oh yeah, you were always right. So what we can't do is just say, well, we have to wait for the system to absorb all of these innovations and change itself. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is we're going to build an entirely new financial architecture, and it's going to refine, and it's going to evolve, and it's going to become more and more trustworthy. And there's going to be a tipping point, and people are going to say, you know what, instead of putting my money into this mutual fund, I'm going to put it into, I'm going to stake Ethereum. And there's going to be a switch. And when that switch happened, it's going to feel like it's overnight, but it's going to be decades of this hard work and things like the merge that get us to the point where we have that tipping point. And that replacement moment is when the true disruption is going to occur. And I think it's inevitable it's going to occur, but we don't know when. We don't know when.
It's absolutely true that the merge is not an overnight. There's been years of work at Ethereum to make it happen, for sure.
Like the bands that play, small clubs for 10 years and nobody pays attention, and then they get a hit record and say, wow, you're an overnight success,
It takes 20 years to be an overnight success, as my good friend Federico Astor said. Joe, I'm going to let you have the last word.
Oh my goodness. No, I think there's tons of opportunity for anybody who wants to go down this road, and it is a rabbit hole, to investigate, understand, learn a little bit more about this, because it's early days. It's very, very early days. And I think that if you're able to wrap your arms around this, if you so desire, you can scale this out to your firm or to your organization such that you can take advantage of this and help this cause. And it is in a way a cause, because there's so much that can be done.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Not in a charitable way, but in a way that is ideological and philosophical, for sure. Exactly. Oh my God, thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time. And we had a fascinating conversation. And let's meet again on ArbTech at another time. And maybe for, what's the next one? The Surge. Have a lovely day, everyone, and
thank you, Sophie.
And
thank you, Joe.
Looking forward to the next installment. Bye.
Thank you, Sophie, Colin, Sean. Bye.